How you feeling?
Um, as good as it's gonna get, as good as I can feel.
Okay. Um, what do you usually find yourself doing on a Saturday night?
Um, honestly, nothing. I'm a homebody. I'm if I'm not out with one of my girlfriends, I'm probably at home just chilling.
Okay. So I'm happy to get you out on this Saturday. Would you say you're feeling like yourself?
Not necessarily. I'm a little anxious.
And what has you so anxious?
Just due to the topic that we're gonna talk about today, it's a little personal.
You
So
consider Do you consider yourself a private person?
yeah, I do.
So, and I appreciate you taking the time to be uncomfortable in this space. What motivates you?
Um, a lot of things motivate me. I guess seeing my parents struggle motivated me a lot. Just wanting more for myself motivates me.
No, I want to say more so motivates you to feel ready to tell your story.
That's an interesting question. um, there is no growth in your comfort zone, right? This is out of my comfort zone. And that was the motivation.
I like that. So, can you tell us who are you and what do you do?
Sure. So I'm Elpedia and I'm in sales.
Okay, in sales, do you want to talk about that at all?
I mean, there's nothing to really talk about. I sell intangible products for a large company.
You show up and make numbers move.
That's it.
All right, all right. So let's get into a little bit of your culture.
Okay.
So, does that play into you being a private?
Yes, it does.
Can you tell me a little bit what your culture is,
I'm Haitian.
and what has been the most impactful thing, do you say, in shaping who you are?
Just that I come from that culture.
Uh, in the culture, growing up Haitian, in America, what are some of the things that you feel have shaped you?
Um, I think we're a resilient people, right? Like that's what we're known for, our resilience, if anything, and the state of our country, right? So that's what like our parents came from. That's what they know. That's who they are. They know resilience. So like growing up, there wasn't a lot of like compassion, right? Like
Yeah,
I'm
I was just gonna say I can reflect on how that resilience plays right into so often being a private person as well, because struggles, you kind of make them feel non-existent. It's like I got to get through this regardless.
you don't have a choice, and who's gonna do anything about it? You're sad, okay? Your problems are still there.
You said your parents were a big motivator for you,
Yeah.
watching them grow up and all of that. And if you said that being resilient and being a private person, but now you find yourself here, ready to share a little bit about that. What happened? What's brought you to? What experiences have you had that have changed, like challenge your resilience, challenge you to be different? I would say.
My mom's passing. It forced me to be vulnerable, which you don't really get in our culture. There's no room for vulnerability, right?
When did your mom pass?
2015. 2018. I'm sorry. I don't know why I said 2015. She died on the 15th of 2018, the Ides of March.
I want to take a moment to say thank you for sharing that with me. I don't have a little bit of background about that. And could you give me? Could you share with us in this moment your experience finding out the terrible news?
Yeah, sure. So, my mom had lung cancer. She had stage 4 lung cancer, and that's how she passed. And my siblings and I, and my cousins and my aunts, we used to sleep at the hospital every night. We would just take turns. And I slept at the hospital the night before. And my mom was never alone in the hospital. If she was alone, she was probably alone for less than an hour. There was somebody always with her. And so I slept at the hospital that night, and the way that her hospital room was set up was in the back of the hospital room. There was like another room, and the room was, there was like a little couch, a table, a cot. Like it was just like another room inside the hospital room. My aunt also slept at the hospital that night, so she slept in that room. And my ex-boyfriend was also there. He wanted to sleep there, and I told him no, but I ended up falling asleep. So he ended up staying anyway. I don't know if you've ever spent the night at the hospital, but it's terrible because you don't get any sleep. Because the nurses come in every 2 to 3 hours to check in. They turn the lights on, and
I have my own experience, so I could definitely relate.
yeah, it's not
The hospital doesn't sleep, so
right.
you end up staying up with it.
Exactly. So the next morning, I get up, and there was also like a full bathroom. So I got ready for work there. I had already packed a bag. My boyfriend at the time, he had left. He had worked earlier than I did, so he had already went home and went and got dressed and did whatever he had to do. And then I said bye to my aunt. And my mom was also on a ventilator at this time, so she couldn't really speak either. So I said goodbye to her, and I went to work.
Did anything feel different about that day?
It did, actually. I can't explain the feeling, but it wasn't a bad one. It was kind of like a peaceful one, which was weird to me, because I remember watching the sunrise from outside of her window, and I was like, "This is really nice," and I just took in the sunrise. So it felt, that's what I felt that day, which was weird because I felt like maybe things are going to turn around today, but they didn't. I went to work. I had a meeting I did not know about. All of our managers were out for some sort of training. And right before the meeting, I went to the elevators and I was by myself. And because our company's kind of big, you're never really alone. But I remember specifically this day that I went over to the elevators, and I thought it was kind of weird that nobody was around, but I was just like, whatever. And before my elevator came, I felt my mom's presence there, to the point where I remember looking around because it felt kind of weird.
On this day that like nobody's around you,
Yeah.
oddly enough, the building
And you know somebody's presence.
yeah.
So I just remember looking around, and then I just shrugged it off, and then I went to my meeting. And then I have a group chat with 3 of my sisters. And I was in this meeting, but I wasn't really paying attention, to be honest. I have my messages on my computer. So me and my sisters are talking. And years ago, my dad had purchased a plot for him and my mom. Due to the circumstances, obviously, I'm not sure what happened, but they just decided that they wanted to be buried somewhere else, I guess. And so we were talking about it in the group chat, about their plots. And one of us was just like, mom's not dead. Like, we gotta stop talking about this. Like, we gotta keep positive.
Staying optimistic.
Yeah, we gotta keep our spirits up. And
You said that was one of your sisters?
yes,
And what was your mindset about all that?
the same. Well, it was the same thing. I was just like, you don't want to have that conversation. Like, even though it was like there, like, you don't ever want to have the conversation of like, your mom's going to die, or, your dad's going to die. It's not a good feeling. And people tell you to keep being optimistic because, like, words of affirmations, and like, you got to speak things into existence and all that.
The miracles they have seen.
Exactly. So no less than, I would say, 2 to 3 minutes later, my aunt calls me. And I was like, why is she calling me? Because it was like, I was just there a couple of hours ago. So I answered. I walked out of the meeting and I answered the phone, and my aunt goes to me, Lulu Kembeko, Mama Mui.
And can you translate what that means?
She said, hold yourself together. Your mom died. And I don't know if you've ever been on a sales floor, but it's loud. But everything just felt dead silent. Like, my world literally had just stopped. Like, it was weird because everything kept moving, but it felt like nothing was moving at the same time. And I don't think I said anything to her. I don't think I responded to her. I just hung up, I think. And I grabbed my laptop, and I didn't say anything to my sisters yet because...
So you said your aunt called you, right?
Correct.
And you were the first person she called?
I assume that I'm the first person she called because I slept there.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't say anything in the group chat because I didn't know what to say. Like, how do you tell your siblings that one of our parents just died? You can't do it over text.
And there's no right way.
Right. I had to tell them that she had cancer. I was the one who had to relay that news. I told them we found out that my mom had cancer on my sister's birthday. So imagine relaying that news.
And what is that timeline like with your finding out your mom has cancer and the time where she's in the hospital to stay?
Less than a year. So we found out in April of the previous year, and then my mom passed in March of the following year.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I just didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. But then, as I'm like, rushing to grab my stuff, the group chat is still going. So like, one of my sisters is like, Matalia just called me. The other one's like, Margaret just called. It was like, we all just got the call. So I was like, okay, me too. Because I like, there's nothing else to say.
It's so much to say, but it's like you're saying, like, to your point, there's nothing.
Yeah, we all got the call. So like,
Did your sisters ever express like or share with you how they got the news and like in what words people said it to them?
No, I don't think that we ever talked about it. Honestly, I don't think they ever heard how I heard the news, but I assume that they all got it the same way. Unless, like, well, my cousin called, I think one or two of them, so I'm sure they got it differently than those of us who got the call from our aunt. I had to tell my brother because he was out of the country.
I just want because I think about like what we just talked about Haitians being resilient and how we process things, right? As a Haitian person, or I'm assuming the older generation,
Yeah.
when they say something to you, they're assuming you process it similarly to them. It's like you don't like take this for what it is.
Yeah.
Like, but I can only imagine hearing at work like, "Hold yourself together. Your mom died."
Yeah. And I didn't really feel any way about that because that's just what we knew. I wasn't angry with her. I just didn't feel any way. It was just like, I mean, it's funny because I just had this conversation with my cousin recently, and she was just like, she told you in the best way that she knew how. And she's right. Like, there's no easy way to relay that information. So she did it how the best way she could.
Yeah, I mean,
So yeah.
for sure, thankfully. But I just I struggle with accepting that. Like I know that it is what it is, but damn, I want so much more for us in that.
I understand that, but in that moment, it's who cares, right? Because there's such a bigger picture going on. Like I couldn't hone in on how she told me. It was what she just told me. So whatever. At this point, I didn't care.
When you got that, how do you cope?
There's no easy way to cope. Like we did do the best that we could. Like when I got to the hospital, like the nurses knew us at this point because we were always sleeping there. So every single one of them kind of already had an idea of who we were. And
You saying what the nurses knew of everybody when you got that call, everybody started showing up to the hospital?
well, I worked right downtown at the time, and the hospital was what 5-10 minutes away. So I got there first. Well, my dad was already there when I got there, actually. So when I got there, when I finally got, my mom's room was right next to the nurse's station. So when I got to the nurse's station, all I could utter was, "Is she?" And like everybody had stood up. Everybody was standing up when I got there, which was already like a bad sign, right? So when I get to the nurse's station, I was like, "Is she?" And like one of the nurses goes, "I'm so sorry." And my legs gave out and I collapsed. And even in that moment, I didn't believe it. I was just like, there's just no way. I was just here. So I got up and this is like freaky. It was like a scene out of a fucking movie, honestly. I get to the door, and before I could even open the door, a priest is standing in front of me. Because he opens the door, and the priest is there. Behind the priest is my dad. Behind my dad, I could see my mom's body. And because she was on a ventilator, I just remember I was just like, just breathe. Like, just like, you could tell when she took like one big breath. So I was just like waiting for it. And she didn't, obviously. So my legs gave out again. And my dad tried to pick me up. And he was just like, we did everything that we could. and he was crying. And like one of the nurses was like, get her some water. And like two of them had to come pick me up off the floor. And I sat on a windowsill for a little bit. My aunt was in the room praying. And I just kind of sat there for a while because I don't know, I just wasn't ready to go in there. And then I finally did. My aunt was in the back room praying, and so I just laid next to my mom's body for a little bit. And there was like a weight restriction on her bed, so it would start beeping like if you were on there too long. So like I couldn't. I was laying there a little bit because her bed kept beeping. So I had to get up. I think they give you like 3 hours or something like that to see the body and say your goodbyes. So like one by one, my siblings are showing up, and my mom's cousin, just call him my uncle, but he used to walk every single day to the hospital. He was like 80 something years old. He would walk from the east side to the hospital every morning to go see my mom. And he had no idea that my mom died yet.
Wow.
So when he got there, my other uncle was already there, and he was like, Yen's not in there. And he was like, what are you talking about? And he was like, she's there, but she's not in there. And so he wears a hat everywhere he goes, took off his hat, went in to go see my mom, and I left. I didn't leave the hospital, I just left the room because I just didn't want to be in there anymore. And yeah, my sister's friends drove up from New Jersey. We were there until it was time for her body to be ruled out. And my sisters were like, I don't want to be here for this. And my sister's friend was like, you don't want to see this. And I was like, I do. I want to see her rolled out. And I waited until she was rolled out, and I cried and I cried. And we left the hospital, and me and my sister and my dad went to the funeral home and planned my mom's funeral that same day.
All in one day. That was quite the process.
Yeah, it was. It was.
What was your mom's name?
Emily Ann.
Emily Ann?
Emily Ann. Marie Emily Ann.
I like that name.
Thank you.
How's your dad doing?
He's doing the best that he can do. They were married for over 45 years. So it was not a small love, I remember one of my mom's friends, she used to come by the house often after my mom had passed. And she said to me one time when she was there, she was like, I've never really seen a couple like your parents before. Like the way that they move together, like I've never really seen it within our community. It was really beautiful to watch. And I really appreciate her for saying that to me because it was nice to hear.
That is very nice.
Yeah.
Praise coming from outside.
Yeah, for sure.
What's your fondest memory you have with your mom?
The fondest memory of me and my mom. I don't have one, to be honest. Every moment right, is like so precious now. So I can't choose just one. I can't.
I like that. I'll take that. I have a quote. I want you to give me. After I say it, you let me know what that means to you.
Okay.
Anything a person feels inside of their own grief is correct.
You want my take on that?
Yeah. What is that? When you hear that, what does that mean to you?
I don't agree with it.
You don't?
No.
Why?
Shit's about to get real emotional. When my mom passed, I felt guilty. And it was, yeah, I just felt guilty. Like there were nights where I ended up falling asleep. So I didn't pray before bed. And I was like, maybe I didn't pray enough. Like it was, my sister was a nurse. And when we found out that she had cancer, my brother was doing all this research of like different diets and all this stuff. And I was like, baby, I didn't do enough. Like, I felt guilty about that. She had cancer. Like, I'm not a doctor. I wouldn't know most medical jargon anyway, but that's how it felt personal. It felt like it was a personal punishment for me. Shit.
Take your time. Well, I was surprised to hear you say you didn't agree with that, but then I think you beautifully explained yourself.
Yeah, there was like, yeah, it was just so like, fuck, like I didn't do enough here, and I felt guilty about it.
In that moment, though, in your grief, when you felt those emotions, what did you do next? Like, what do you feel like those emotions triggered?
I almost didn't survive it, honestly. It was, there's only like one person who knows this, actually, but it got dark. It got really fucking dark. And it's not like I ever tried to, I never had an attempt on my life. And I want to make that clear. But I thought about it for sure. Are you still blessed with your mom?
Yes, I am. And I almost feel selfish, or not selfish, but I don't know how to put this. But like, my mom also had a bout with cancer, and I'm very grateful for things to go a different way. And it hurts me to say that in this moment.
But it shouldn't, right? Like, that's amazing. And had you talked to me in 2018, my reaction probably would have been different. Because a lot of the time I was thinking, why my mom? Like, why mine? There were people that I knew that had shitty relationships with their moms. And I'm like, this lady over here is garbage. She treats her daughter or she treats her son like this. And like, I just couldn't grasp why her.
Why is she gonna live to 98?
Yeah, I mean, it's honestly a very terrible way of thinking. Like, it's not like I was wishing death on anybody else's mom, but it was just like I wanted, I needed a reason for it. I needed a reason.
I mean, emotions are a hell of a thing. I mean, I think I definitely want to say thank you again for being so vulnerable enough to share your experience and your own thought processes about how dark it could possibly be, because I have my own experiences with that. I mean, I've shared it on this podcast as well. It's been a big motivator for why I do have this podcast, because I've had just coming to acknowledge that I've had dark thoughts and struggled with emotions for a long time till I could no longer cope. And I don't think anything in particular happened that was like so traumatic, like, oh, now I just can't go on. I think everything just came to a head. And I can only imagine if I did deal with something or deal with a loss in a certain way earlier, and how that would have impacted me when I didn't know how to access the supports I do have now, or have the coping skills that I do have now, because emotions can be difficult to deal with. They can be very heavy burdens. And when I hear the quote of anything a person feels inside of their own grief, like, I don't think there's a right or wrong way to interpret that, but I just acknowledge that that's your process. And whatever is in your process is your process. And I don't ever want to shame anybody for their process, because I know there's going to be ups, there's going to be downs, there's going to be times where, like, you're resentful. Resentful, and when I look back on our culture and who we are as a people, resilience through silence, being resilient and maxing it in silence, I think you just become a powder keg of resentment. It only takes one thing to take all that out.
Yeah. Facts. That's a fact. Even at the wake, I could remember, how everybody comes to like shake hands with the family and kiss you and all this stuff. Like, I just wasn't into it, right? Like, I had a small, like, anxiety attack at a funeral. Like, I couldn't breathe, or at the wake. And when it came time for everybody to come shake your hand and give you your condolences, I would say about 85%, maybe even 90% of the people that came to shake my hand and give me a kiss on the cheek, they don't say, like, some people say my condolences, and I'm just translating, obviously. There was very few of that. For the most part, everybody just walks by you and says courage, and just tells you have courage in this moment. Even like looking at my mom right across from me, like that's how deep it is. It's like you don't even get that. Even in this moment, I have to like chin up, you know? Crazy.
It's like that expectation, but you better just keep going.
Yeah.
But that's a lot. And I'm hoping you're taking the time to process things in a healthy way now. But let me take a step back and ask you, how are you processing things now?
Better. Way better. I mean, when it first happens, it's like a shock to your entire nervous system, right? Like, what's a world without your mom in it? You can't imagine it. Because even if you did imagine it, it's nothing like what you think it is. I can tell you that for sure. It's nothing like what you think it is. And you don't really have a choice. Like, I was on autopilot, I feel like once my bereavement was up at work, and I went to work the following Monday, and my manager was like, what are you doing here? And I was like, I can't be home right now because everybody at home is crying and is sad, and there's people in and out of the house that crying, and that's sad. And I'm in sales too, right? And like, when you're in sales, you're putting on a performance and you adapt to whoever you're talking to on the phone. So if I have to make phone calls all day and be somebody else whose mom didn't die, that's who I needed to be that day. And that only lasted a couple of hours. I ended up going home anyway because I was just like, fuck this. Like,
It's not the place for you to be.
these people can kiss my ass. Like, I could not. Even if I wasn't going to be home, like, I don't need to be here because, like,
I respect that though. Like, it's like part of because I don't know what I would have done in that time, but I can imagine how work would have been a distraction, because work can be a distraction for me now when I'm going through something. But then taking that moment to be like, you know what? Nah, and going home.
yeah. Because that distraction only works for so long, right? Like, at some point, you have to face it. And it doesn't matter what it is, right? Like, it doesn't even matter if it's like your boyfriend broke up with you and now you're out here doing whatever, and to be a distraction for whatever the case may be. Like, sometimes you just don't want to face your shit. And I didn't. I didn't. So I went to work. And again, it didn't last long, but it was just like, I just couldn't be there. I had to be somebody whose mom just died because it was going to show up later.
That was your reality. You can only keep that down for so long.
Yeah. And that was the issue, right? Like, that guilt that was eating me up, like, that was like a part of my ego, right? Like, how big did my ego have to be at that time for me to think that, like, I was being personally punished? Like, that's ridiculous. It wasn't personal. Like,
So, and I'm assuming, but reflecting on your ego, did that play a role in the shift in your process? Because you said to me, if I was somebody, if I would have had mentioned to you something about my mom, or in 2018, you could have possibly had like negative thoughts, right?
mm-hmm.
So what triggered that, you being open, or being open to being vulnerable? Like, maybe there's something in me that I have to take a look at.
The guilt ate me up. It 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 almost killed me. It really did. Like, I thought about different ways of how I was going to go out. And like, there's a stone wall near my parents' house. And every time I would pass it, I would remember, like, I would be like, what if I just sped right into this wall? And like, it's so crazy because even in that moment, I had to think logically, even though that's such a like an illogical thing. And I remember I was thinking to myself, like, that's not a guaranteed death. Like, if I just drive into this wall, that doesn't mean I'm gonna die. So that's not gonna do anything I'm just gonna be hurt, and then I'm gonna be pissed that I'm hurt, right? Like,
Yeah.
it was just like stupid shit like that. And it wasn't like I was gonna like, I couldn't jump off the roof of my building. I couldn't like it had to be like it was just a tragic accident, because I couldn't tell anybody how I was feeling.
Yeah, and this, because there's so much stigma that comes with that. The ideation is it's so layered. And I do want to ask, when you said you didn't, there's nobody you could share that with.
Mm-hmm.
How is there somebody that you didn't end up sharing that with? Like, how did you cross that bridge? Like, when did you, or did you just wake up one morning and you drove by that stone wall and you said, you know what, I'm just gonna park next to you today?
That would be a good story if I just woke up one day and was like, oh, I'm feeling better. But no, to be honest, what happened was I went to go talk to my dad about something. And I don't really remember what the topic was, but it was the first time that I think I really, like, I knew that my dad was stressed out, but I think that it was the first time I really like saw what all of this did to him. It aged him for sure. And I think that he had just finished crying or something like that. But his pants were big, like he had lost a bunch of weight, and he had lost a bunch of weight to the point where, like, when you tighten your belt and you still have like that scrunch of material,
Oh yeah.
that's how much weight he had lost. And I don't really remember what the topic of conversation was, but I just remember I was like, damn, like my ego took a step back and was just like, it's not only you here, right? Like there's other people here. It's not just you. And I decided to go to therapy. And that was it.
So wait a second, everybody's going through it.
Yeah, and it's not like, it's weird because it's not like I didn't know that everybody was going through it. It was just, I can't tell you why. It's just, like, I've said this a lot, but like grief is not linear. So like what you feel in that moment is not always what it is. And that's why I don't agree with that statement, right? Like my guilt, I don't know where that came from. And I think it was just me trying to make sense of things, because if it was my fault and I could take the blame for it, that was the reason that she died. It had a reason that way. And it really doesn't make any sense looking back at it. But when your mind is in this fog, nothing really makes sense.
Do you feel like seeing your dad, like, could have been like a physical manifestation of all the time that has passed and what that grief looked like for yourself, or like the experience of it? Because when you open up your eyes and you're like, wait a second, I've been trying to make sense of this and that, but look what's happening around me.
Possibly. I mean, again, I was like on autopilot. Like I was going to work, I was hitting my goals, I was smiling when I needed to smile, I was laughing when I needed to laugh. But I was miserable. I was fucking miserable, and I wasn't thinking about what this did to my siblings. I wasn't thinking about what this did to my aunts or my uncles or my dad or anybody. It was just like, what the fuck happened to me? To me, because it only happened to me. That was my thought process. Like it was just me. So like maybe seeing my dad, I do. I think that seeing my dad was just like an eye opener. Like you gotta like this isn't you. Like you gotta figure this out. Yeah.
I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about ego because I feel like it has come up a couple times, and that's something that I think about a lot as well. Because you feel like we grow as people, and we start to think, all right, you know what? Let me put my ego in the back seat, right? But you're important. You know what I mean? And so, like, sometimes I feel like we do need that because, like, even though like we can take a second and shit, we're like, all right, I I I forgot about my sisters and my brother. Not that you forgot about them. I didn't pay as much attention as I should have, right? But what it takes for you to be okay and who you are as a person and what feeds that, I think, is integral to you being able to be there for the people in your life. So how do you balance that?
How do I balance what though exactly?
I would say, because you said before it was your ego percent. Like, why did this happen to me? And you had to take a look at everybody else. Do you still? Let me take a second. How do you practice your self care? Because I think people that when you put your ego into the back seat, it can often lead to not really taking care of yourself and putting other people, not always first, but placing an importance that doesn't need to be there all the time.
Interesting. Okay. I I'll start with the self-care. Um my self-care could be doing nothing, literally. If I on the weekend don't feel like cleaning my place and I want to stay in bed and watch a movie or binge on some stupid show I'm watching, I'm going to do that. If that day I want to put on a face mask and use, my under eye patch things, wash my hair, like it could be anything. If I want to listen to music and put on a fire, which is something I did today, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do whatever I feel like, which is that's going to bring me peace in this moment. Excuse me. And it's actually funny because a friend of mine, actually, Amy, recently said to me, we were talking about something and I can't remember what it was, but she literally was just like, I'm going to do it because that's what my parents came here for. And it's funny because she's right. Like our parents came here for us to do what we wanted to do. They took these sacrifices so that we could be happy here. So if we're going to be happy, then if I'm going to do what's going to make me happy, that's going to make them happy because that was their whole purpose of coming here, right? So yeah.
But okay, I said doing what makes you happy makes them happy.
Yeah. And that's part of my self-care.
Okay, I got good parents. I like that. Good parents. I don't think that's always the case in a lot of people's lives, right?
Well, not listen, there are some things that I'm sure our parents would not be happy with, right? Like everything that I do, I can't necessarily be like, well, this is going to make my parents happy. When it's like, no, they would probably be like, this is probably a terrible decision. You probably shouldn't be doing that. But again, I have the freedom to do so because they came here for me to have that freedom to make those decisions. Look at the state of our country right now, right? Like, growing up here And what's going on right now out there, I wouldn't survive it. I wouldn't have the survival skills that my parents would probably survive it, but I would tap out in a second.
No, I feel you. I feel you. Those are not skills that I want to have.
Fair. Inaccurate. I don't want those skills either.
Okay. How does your ego help you in sales?
My ego helps me in sales because I'm good at my job, right? Like, it's also easier to sell our products because I believe in the business. So, like, if I didn't believe in it, it would be a harder sell. But because I do and I know what it can do, it's easier for me to be more confident in it. So, like, my ego's like, even if I don't make the sale, right?
Okay.
I'll go into a call super confident. And my clients, sometimes they'll give you a lot of pushback because they don't want to spend X amount of money for X amount of time. They just don't want to do it, or they don't have it in the budget or whatever. We're going to find it in that budget. That's what the ego, right? Like, that's what my ego tells me. It's like, all right, like, what else are you guys spending money on? Like,
you guys don't realize you need this.
yeah. And that's what makes you successful in sales. You have to be confident in it, because if you're not confident in it, people could tell on the other line, like, what is this person talking about right now?
Okay. Can you give me an example of where, and you can take a second,
Okay.
where your ego let you down the wrong path or to a negative outcome? It could have been you could have had good intentions, but the outcome was just not it.
I mean, it let me down last quarter. I missed my goal, honestly, and I was confident that I was not going to miss. I was like, there's no way that I could miss, because I had never missed a goal before. So even though I was behind in the middle of the quarter, I was just like, I'm going to be fine. When I really should have put my foot to the pedal and really pushed for those numbers. But my ego was like, you've done this so many times. What are you talking about? The last quarter? Like, please, you got this. You don't have to do anything more than what you've normally done in the past. And I was wrong and I missed.
Listen, that story hit a little bit too close to home. I can tell you from experience at my job, like, we're responsible for dosage. And some days I'm like, I spoke to them kids. That data's gonna be in there. It's gonna be fine. And then the 27th comes and I'm like, wait a second. 2 weeks out and they want to meet on Monday about the last 4 weeks. It's like, all right, I'm showing up to the meeting and then they're like, so Ryan, so let's talk about the data. And I'm like, shit, you got me. You got me. You got me and my ego very with my pants down, but that's life. Can you tell me what are some of your upcoming goals, or what is the biggest goal that you have upcoming that's important to you?
You know, it's funny. My therapist asked me this at the end of last year. Obviously, she was like, what do you have? What are your goals going into the new year? And my literal response to her was nothing, because I have been setting goals my entire life. And this is my year of rest. And that's not to say that I don't have goals and I don't have anything that I want to accomplish, or the goals won't come up. But it's time for me to rest. It's time for me to relax. Like, I've done the goals, I've accomplished the goals that I've needed to thus far. So my next one, and this could be my ego talking, my next one, I'm going to get it done when that comes up. As of right now, though, I'm just going to rest.
I love that. And I think you elaborated on the power of the ego because sometimes you got to put that battery in your own back, and sometimes you got to be the person to say, you know what, let me take it out and rest and recover and shit, do whatever you need to do for yourself, right?
Yeah, you need to control your ego too, because your ego could also lead you to thinking that you're somebody that you're not. And I think that was the problem for me, right? And that's why I took things so personal, because like, who am I in the larger scale of things, right? How could I think that my mom died because of me? It just didn't make any sense. But again, like, your ego makes you think like I'm that person.
I know you don't have a goal set for this year, but can I ask you, where do you see yourself next year mentally, physically, spiritually?
Next year, that's a good question. But you know what they say, like, you plan, God laughs. You know,
I feel like he laughs every time I wake up. I can't hold you. Like, I budget, I do my work, and then I wake up and M&T, I get that bill notification. I say, what? And then I get a notification from my professor. that's that's my life.
God laughs.
But
Seriously, I don't.
you gotta hope for something though, right?
Of course, it's I want good things for me next year. Like, I'm still in therapy. I'm still healing, and hurting in all of it. But yeah, next year, I just would like to be stronger in those aspects, all of them. Physically, mentally, spiritually. I would just like to be stronger.
I wish all that for you.
Thank you. Same, likewise.
Is there anything that you want to ask me? Or do you have anything you feel like you would want to elaborate on?
Yeah, actually, what you feel in your grief is not correct all the time. I'm still healing from it. My mom's anniversary is next week of her passing. Are you familiar with the Ides of March?
No, what is that?
In Roman history, it is known as a day of misfortune and despair and death, because that is the day that Julius Caesar was assassinated. And I'm sure you're familiar with the story of Julius
Yeah.
Caesar. And I always remember that because that's what my sister had mentioned the day that our mom passed, because it was that day. And she was like, I should have known. How could we have known? Right. Like, everybody just had a different feeling that day. And that famous line of like, et tu, Brute?
Yeah.
Right? Where he's like dying and you're taking your last breath, and like, you realize that somebody you love has betrayed you, and like, but you're dying. Like, that's what that felt like. And that's how personal it was for me. Like, what brings me a smidget of peace now is knowing that my mom served her purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And some people know what their purpose is and some people don't. I'm not sure what mine is. I'm not sure what my mom's was. And that's not for me to know. I know the purpose that she served in my life, and I'm happy with it. You know what I mean? But we each and every one of us, even all of us in this room, we all have a purpose. And whatever that is, she did it. She fulfilled it. And God was like, "You know what? You can come home. Like, you're done. Like, your mission is complete." And if that could bring anybody peace in that moment, like when a loved one passes away, like, I think that would be it. Their purpose is served, and that doesn't make it less painful. But it did bring me a peace with it for sure.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah.
But this is something to hold us, where our mission is to bring us closer to our emotions, to understand not only who we are, but who we want to be.